A lot of couples don't do that. And when you can do that, when you can understand what's aligned for you in the capacity that you two are traveling in, that can solve, like we said, 80% of the problems, 80% of the stress that comes with traveling.
And then on top of that, we actually planned and prepared what we were going to do the moment we got home to set up for the next week. And so you don't necessarily need to operate to that level, but if this resonates, it is better. And there's a way to make sure that your travel is optimized.
Conscious couples, business partners, and singles committed to attracting their dream partner. Welcome to the Conscious Couples podcast, where we share our life, love story, and combined relationship expertise to help you create and consistently cultivate the most magnificent, intimate relationship possible.
Never again will you feel hopeless and alone in your intimate relationship challenges.
Having accumulated thousands of hours coaching conscious couples and individuals all over the world, as well as starting and growing a global business together, Alan and I are here to guide you in all things relationships.
Thank you again for tuning into the one place where it's not about you or me, it's about the we. Conscious couples and individuals all over the world, welcome back to the Conscious Couples podcast, where it's not about me or you, it's about the we. For all things intimate relationships. First, a shout out to Next Level Podcast Solutions and the Next Level Podcast Solutions team for producing this show. Welcome to episode number 16 of the Conscious Couples podcast. I'm just joking. Stress-free travel with your partner. So Emilia and I know that it can be very stressful to travel with others and with your intimate partner. And we want to have a magnificent experience when we travel and when we do things. And sometimes that doesn't always happen. So as always, love, ladies first.
Thank you, love. Well, my intention for this episode to get us started is to help people realize that travel and stress don't have to be synonymous. Though that seems like a utopia, it actually can be the case if you put intentional effort into what we're going to be talking about today and in future events / episodes. But in particular for this episode, I want to make sure that we touch upon the fact that what we've learned and what we've experienced is that the stress really starts way before you realize it. So before I dig into that, babe, I will send it over for your intention and for you to open up with story.
All right. So my intention for this episode is the lesson here is how can you and your partner communicate and understand one another so that you can stay on the same page? And essentially what Emilia and I brainstormed before this episode was if you start off not on the same page, the chances of you staying on the same page during and after, but even before is very, very slim. And so Emilia and I are trying to always find the root cause of the stressors, not only in our own life, but for all of you out there listening or watching. And essentially what we came to realize is that if you're not communicating in advance the purpose of why you're traveling in the first place, and what is your intention for this trip, what's most important to you about this trip, if you're not asking those questions in advance, what might we need to plan or pack in advance? Of course, you're not going to feel like you're on the same page or on the same team, so to speak. And so the example here, Emilia and I went to Otis last weekend, and her family has 2 homes on a lake in Western Massachusetts, and it's a beautiful, beautiful place, and Emilia and I love to go there. And what we figured out essentially is that there's a pregame, there's a game, and then there's a post-game. And so there's the planning phase, which is, from the moment you decide to go on the trip to when you actually get in the car on your way, or the plane or train or automobile, whatever.
Forgot spaceship.
Yeah, and the spaceship as well, obviously, and or the go-kart. And so before you get in the go-kart, there's the pre-game, which is the planning phase, essentially. How do you get on the same page and set intentions and all that? Then you've got during, which is the logistics of the actual travel and the trip itself when you're actually there, when you've arrived to either the destination and or the house that you're staying at or whatever. Then you've got afterwards, how do you do what we refer to as an experience review to figure out, okay, how did that go? Did we maximize the value of that experience and what could we do better? So Emilia and I, for example, from the moment we decided to go to Otis last weekend, we immediately started to talk. And one of the things that we talked about was Emilia asked me if we could go earlier so that we could protect her sleep, because a lot of times what ends up happening is we leave on Friday night late after the gym and we don't get there until, I don't know, 11 p.m. And then it's like we got to set up way too late. We got to set up and then service Saturday. So every Saturday I do book club. She does podcasting, all kinds of different meetings and coaching and all that stuff. And so even when we travel, we set up Saturday to be service. And then Saturday evening is for R&R, and then Sunday is the adventure part, whether it's a hike or going on the lake or the boat or whatever. And so Emilia had asked, do you mind if we go earlier on Thursday? And I had expressed my truth and said that I have a heavy day Friday that requires my office and my camera and my setup. And my most important coaching calls are on Friday. And that wouldn't be aligned for me, but that's okay because you can leave on Thursday and then I'll meet you Friday night and I'll take care of Tucker all day Friday at home. And you ended up leaving, I think, Friday morning instead. And then I didn't.
We talked about that like Wednesday.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wrap my head around that is the whole thing.
So we're still trying to figure this out ourselves. But essentially, we try to stay on the same page. And personally, I think we stay on the same page certainly better than I ever have with anyone. And I think you're more proactive in terms of planning than anyone I've ever met. So I think that helps, absolutely. But what we want to help everyone out there do is get on the same page before, stay on the same page during, and then improve through sharing of mutual experience review after. And so we got there. Emilia left Friday morning. She ended up getting there, and she spent the day and worked there that day. I ended up getting there that night with Tucker. And then we worked all day Saturday, and then we had a wonderful evening Saturday night, and then we had adventures. We went on a bike ride, and we went on the boat, and we spent time with her family Saturday night and Sunday. And then we left on Sunday evening, and she took her car and I took my car, but we ended up talking on the phone on the car ride home. And there was some traffic, so it was like a 2-hour drive. And the entire 2 hours, we literally unpacked the entire experience and what we think we can improve and what was amazing and what wasn't so great and all these different things so that we can make sure next time's even better. And we also checked in that evening as well. And then on top of that, we actually planned and prepared what we were going to do the moment we got home to set up for the next week. And so you don't necessarily need to operate to that level, but if this resonates, it is better. And there's a way to make sure that your travel is optimized, and that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. And what I was going to say to add to that is the fact that, what we got done in one day is what some people would in their travel hectic days could only imagine. And the reality is like what really comes down to, like you had said, communication is what, when we ask couples, like, what do you believe is the biggest challenge that couples have, whether it's travel or whether it's, courageous conversations, it always comes back down to that word. And the truth is, what do we actually mean underneath that? And like you said, babe, like it starts at the time where you agree and put it in your calendar if you happen to use a calendar. When you agree and you lock in that said travel, that said trip, whatever it is, from the moment that starts happening, the gears really start turning. And what we've found is that typically happens in one partner more than the other partner. And we'll use our clients for an example in this experience review, if you will. But very similar to what we had done, we had shared our experience with them in terms of how we travel. And when we got on the phone with them, they were really, really stressed out. Matter of fact, shout out to them. They were in the car on their way to the destination, the trip that they were traveling to. And in this moment, there was a lot of high tension, lots of stress, which, it is normal, obviously, because travel is stressful in and of itself. But as we started to kind of ask them, like, what's going on? We started to dig a little bit and delayer. We realized that the 80% of their stress was coming from the need to really fulfill the expectation that was set of others and or of the couple. So for example, them getting there, and I don't know if this was the exact time, but getting there at 9 p.m. to their friend's place was the most important objective or goal by traveling and making things the way that they needed to be. So as soon as that date and that time of arrival, their ETA was kind of set in stone when it was communicated with friends, with family, etc., the gears of stress started rolling. And in one partner, we realized that it started to happen a lot faster and a lot of different mechanics than the other partner. And we found out that, that morning of the other partner didn't even have their suitcase ready. And we see that happening with a lot of people. And, I think to the point that you had mentioned earlier, babe, like what is the purpose of the travel? Getting clear on that is absolutely everything, because why? Like when you have the why of why you're going to be traveling together, everyone wants to have these beautiful trips, these traveling opportunities with your partners. Why? Because let's face it, having a fun, unique experience with your partner and building memories, that's really what it's all about. But when you don't meet those expectations that you've set of others, or that you've set of yourself to fulfill with others, like for example, in Otis, like if I were to tell my parents that I'll be there by, 11 a.m. in the morning, right? There's nothing more that we want to do than engage and connect and have those beautiful social experiences that travel just so happens to provide. And when you get there, it's like, oh my God, what time? Like, should we prepare for dinner? Because underneath that is I just want, I want us to be able to gather and have fun and all that jazz, right? So peeling away and understanding what your expectations are of travel. And like you said earlier, babe, expressing your needs. What is important to you? What makes this travel aligned? A lot of couples don't do that. And when you can do that, when you can understand what's aligned for you in the capacity that you two are traveling in, that can solve, like we said, 80% of the problems, 80% of the stress that comes with traveling.
I think the other piece that's so important too is if you understand the nuances of the logistics in advance, you can handle them much better. And so I think that to your point, sweetheart, I think I realized in this moment that there's not a lot of people who are communicating why they're traveling in advance and what's important to you when we get there, what's important to you on the way home, what's important to you leading up to it.
What do you need from me?
What do you need from me? How can I support you?
Yeah.
And I wonder to myself, like, and let me just ask you this, why are we doing that so well? I just had a very humbling moment in this episode where I'm like, I wonder, like, did I do that before us? Like, did you do that before us?
I feel like I don't think so. Not to this degree. Certainly not. I mean, I think I would be naive to say that I was where I'm at right now. I think there's a couple things.
Why didn't we?
I think there's a couple things that contributed to that. Like a lot of people want to point the finger at poor communication, but honestly, I don't think former relationships maybe felt safe to express their truth of like what their needs were, right? Because like, just think about it. How many people struggle in general to express their needs in advance? There's this saying that like we're not mind readers for a reason, because again, back to that expectation, our social need for belonging is so hardwired in every one of us as humans that when it comes to our partners and us trying to travel, it's usually because we want to create a memory, right? We want to create a memory with our partner. We want to create a memory with whoever we're going to visit, if we're going to visit anyone, right? And so communicating in advance of what we need, number one, you got to have clarity on what you need, right? The couple that we're speaking of, like, that person didn't even know. She didn't even know what she needed leading up until that moment. And then number two, is it safe to communicate your needs? In former relationships, we have a lot of people have so many negative bids, so many negative experiences in communicating needs in advance. Why? And this is another episode that we're going to get into.
Hi, everybody. I'm Caleb, and this is my beautiful wife, Angela. We're pretty new clients to Al and Emilia and their conscious couples coaching.
Yeah, I think we started back in early 2022, around February, and our relationship has completely shifted in a few short months.
I think one of the biggest takeaways from working with them was their communication, which I believe is an obstacle for most couples. I was talking to Ange in a way that I would understand, but it wouldn't connect to her, which caused some arguments. But Al and Amelia were able to point that out, and now I can talk to her how she's going to understand. She can do the same for me.
Yes, our communication is way better than it's ever been. We've been together for about 6 years now. And as well as just really figuring out what our core values personally are, but as well as what they are in our relationship. So being able to communicate from that space is really valuable. So thank you, Alan and Emilia, for everything you've done and for leading the way.
They don't believe when their needs are expressed and communicated that their partner is hearing them. For example, babe, I need you to sit down and let's schedule this. Let's put this on the calendar. And you immediately take what I say, hear me, and sit down with me to schedule things and say, okay, what do we need from here? You and I are strategic thinkers by nature, but I think that a lot of our repetitions in the positive affirmations with that between you and I, because that is what makes us feel like we're on the same team. It's like, oh, okay, awesome. What do I need from you? This is what I need from you. Like, I feel safe to be able to communicate that with you. And in former relationships, definitely not, because like a lot of it goes back down to self-belief, right? But that's a whole nother episode. Like I said, babe, a lot of people struggle with that. Communicating your needs in advance, you got to have clarity. And a lot of people don't have clarity on what your needs are.
So much comes down to clarity, self-awareness.
Yeah.
Like I when I told you that it's not aligned for me to go on Thursday.
Think about it.
I know.
You know, if I didn't know my goals for like my brain health, I wouldn't have clarity on why I needed things to
regarding
be
your
X, Y,
sleep.
Z. Yeah.
Regarding your sleep. So, it's very difficult for us to keep this so simple because there's so many layers to these things. And I just to be vulnerable with the listeners right now, like Emilia and I really want to try to take these complex topics and make them as simple and tangible as possible. But every time I get on the mic with you, I always realize that it's like, how am I supposed to, how do we explain this? And I don't mean that from any sort of an ego place. I mean it from a genuine, vulnerable place of like, I have no idea how to explain how we operate.
It's so
layered. And it's like, we have like a whiteboard and we plan on our calendar and we like plan our planning. And it's like, and I think that I've never felt so on the same team as someone else. And I'm trying to figure out too, like what part of that is your proactive nature and what part of that is mine and what part of that is reps in the, so for example, let's say you've been playing soccer your entire life and then you and I have both been playing soccer our entire life and we're going to go to travel to a field and we're going to play soccer against another team and you and I are on a team. It's not going to be that hard for us to get on the same page because we've been doing this our entire life. Whereas if you've never played soccer before, I'm going to have to like really bring you to my level before we actually step on that field. And even then it's going to be brutal. And then on top of that, I'm going to feel misunderstood because I don't know how to communicate to you what we need in advance because you don't have the skills or capabilities to really play soccer at my level. And then it's like, and then when we do an experience review, you might be in a delicate place because you just got off the field and got your butt kicked.
Right.
And I think that in this analogy, what I'm very humbled by on this podcast in particular, I told Emilia, the Conscious Couples podcast for me is probably the most humbling experience that I've ever had. Starting a business with you and intimate relationships. I mean, I understand why intimate relationships struggle so much.
Yeah.
Because it's like, how many couples really are doing this? They're sitting down 2 weeks in advance saying, hey, is this aligned for you? Is this trip aligned for you?
Here's an opportunity. Can we make this work?
Can we make this work? Right.
And is this aligned?
You had mentioned this earlier too when we were preparing. How many couples just assume that this is aligned? Like, oh, okay, by the way, there's a wedding coming up in 2 weeks. And it's like, I didn't even agree to that.
Right.
Right? You and I never do that. I literally ask
to
you.
each other's time, babe.
That's got to be another episode. I think that we've talked about it in the past, but that should be another episode as well.
Yeah.
I don't like say yes to a wedding unless I talk to Emilia about it first.
Yeah.
Ever.
We're on the same page.
I never will with that. And is that abnormal, do you think?
Yeah, 100%. And I think those who are attracted to this episode definitely are having some exposure to that. Whether you grew up, because here's the thing too, when you grow up and your family's traveling, you likely have no say in the matter. I was talking to Bianca, my business partner, earlier about this in the week. And I was saying like, we become very docile and just kind of like fawn, like for example, like put everyone else's needs above ours at a very young age. Because at the end of the day, if you're parents and you were raised, or your grandparents or caretakers or whatever, and I'll bring this full circle, if they wanted to travel as a kid, you're either coming with or someone's babysitting you or someone's taking care of you.
Yeah, it's not
like,
really an option.
There's no option.
There's no choice in the matter.
There's not a lot of parents, and this is where conscious parenting, I know you and I will be incredible at this, at like, hey, what would make this exciting? We're thinking about this opportunity. We're thinking about traveling as a family, you know, like, hey, Joey, or hey, whoever, Josephine, like, do you guys want to come? Was that ever a question? Like, and I'm sure that might have been a question that came, but like at the same time, like parents usually just kind of take the reins and like, this is going to be fun for us. And I think that that's where it starts, where it's like, you don't have a choice. And I'm grateful because my parents definitely made us have fun in capacities that lit me up like a child and saw things that I never otherwise would have seen. Cause like as a little kid, if I have like rainbow beads in front of me and bracelets that I want to make, like that's my entire world, right? So my world was expanded through that. However, with that as well, babe, to the point, like we have a lot of reps as we grow up as children of not really having a choice and not feeling as though we have a choice. So that feeling like you have a choice starts very, very young. And that's what's brought to the table when it comes to the communication and being on the same page.
You mean the feeling of not having a choice?
Not having choice,
yeah,
right. That's why athletics is a really great reference point in this, because it's like, ultimately you guys have an end goal. And if you look at travel as like a goal, if your goal is to create meaningful, deep, memories with your partner, keep that front and center.
Yeah.
Because just like, for example, the couple that I referenced that we were doing client work with earlier, when they kept the goal front and center, that like their relationship is way more important than the results of getting to their friend's house
by the
time that they said, by the expectations that they set for themselves, like all this stress just kind of melts away.
I know. And you and I have had those moments too of like, it's 10 p.m. We just got out of the gym. We haven't finished packing. And I remember sitting there with you like, why are we even doing this? Yeah. This is not fun. This isn't valuable. Like
it pulls the fun out of it.
It takes the fun out of it. It's the fun governor or the fun vampire.
Yeah.
But I think again, we got to wrap up here, but my soliloquy, my synopsis, for lack of better phrasing, my thesis, I should say, is the biggest reason why stress is a thing. Thank you, sweetheart. The biggest reason why stress is a thing during travel really has to do with you don't know why you're traveling in the first place. Yep. You don't know how to plan effectively and understand each other in advance so that you can support one another. You're not aware of your own needs. And if you aren't expressing them to your partner in advance, saying, hey, just so you're aware, last time we traveled, it really did bother me when XYZ happened. And I'm not making you wrong for it, but can we please make sure this time we grab waters in advance because we were dehydrated and pulled the joy out of it for me. Right. And also we listened to this music that really wasn't very good. Can we this time maybe create a playlist or something?
Yeah.
I think that
create problem solver.
It always comes down to intentionality.
Yeah.
How intentional are you with your travel? I guarantee you there's an inverse correlation between how intentional you are and how little stress there is.
100%.
So intentionality goes up and stress goes down.
For sure.
And if intentionality goes down, stress goes up. Well, and it's inversely correlated.
100%. Babe, on my Remarkable I have in front of me, the biggest takeaway is the why. Why are you traveling? And with stars right next to it, intentional travel.
Yeah.
If you don't know why the heck you're traveling, aka your partner said yes to something and is now expecting you to come, or they said yes to something so that they could impress or fulfill the needs of someone else's whims, right? If you're not choosing in advance if this is aligned for you and your partner, guarantee the stress will be heightened and increased. It's just like a plane. When it takes off, if it's not pointed in the right direction of where it needs to go, it's going to be miles and miles and miles away from actually where it needs to go, unless it takes a giant right-hand turn. In this analogy with the relationship, you got to start out knowing what the purpose is, knowing your why as a couple, and really focusing on that as you go through the process, the planning, the communicating your needs, trying to get clarity on your own accord, right? I know the stress for us whenever there's stress, it's because we typically will have a lack of clarity of like, what is the stress going on internally? And then the second point of stress is how do we communicate that to each other so that we can support one another.
Yeah.
That's always what it comes down to.
And then how do we make sure next time we get a little better at this, knowing that there's still going to be some stress?
Yes.
But we can get better and better and better. So there's no such thing as perfect. There's just better. But if you're not on a team at trying to get better at the travel piece, it's interesting because couples, all these negative experiences and all these negative bids and all this stress, you end up getting triggered and hurting each other and resentment and
like
that
hating
it. What could have been a wonderful experience of memories and love turns into this really negative thing that just builds all this negative stuff. So at the Conscious Couples podcast, our goal is to help you succeed at a higher level in your intimate relationship. And this is definitely one of the big ones. I didn't expect it to be this.
So layered.
There's so many layers to this. Now I understand why you had, so much on. So just to take you behind the scenes real quick before we go, Emilia and I always touch base before we do these episodes because we want them to be as valuable as possible. And we're trying to keep them as simple as possible, but also the nuances of these things are so layered. And Emilia had 3 categories with 3 subsections each. And that actually, she's going to talk to you about our next Relationship Talks event. So if this episode resonated, make sure you attend that event because the difference is we can go for a full hour with a catered presentation behind the scenes, not recorded, not repurposed, and we can do live coaching. You don't have to participate if you don't want. You can turn your mic off and your camera off and just listen in if you want, but they're just a much deeper dive. One of the things I'm humbled by, like I said, is how do we keep it simple on this podcast and tangible and easily take something you can take away and actually do something with? But those events are really where the real deep behind the scenes work is done.
For sure.
So she's going to tell you about that. But real quick as well, if this episode resonated with you and your partner are struggling with traveling together or struggling in general, if you're having relationship challenges, there's no greater joy in life than in an intimate relationship, but there's also no greater pain.
Truth.
The greatest opportunity for love and joy is an intimate relationship, hands down. But therefore, that comes with something. And that's also the greatest source of pain for a lot of people. If you're in pain right now, we can help. Please reach out. We love to meet our listeners. So the link to book on our calendar, every Saturday we do a free relationship talks for at least a half an hour. We often go over. Book on our calendars as soon as possible. We'll dig deep and we do not bite. They're completely private. We love to meet our listeners, and you are totally safe to express your truth, and we promise we will get you on a better trajectory.
Yeah, so before I even tell you about this event, that I really want to invite our listeners and our community to, the biggest takeaway I would say for this episode is to ask yourself, why are you traveling in the first place? You and your partner, if you're listening to this episode, you're stressed out for a reason. Do a root cause analysis and go to the why. That's always the root of it. Is it because you want to spice things up a bit? What's the why underneath that? Right?
Ours was adventure and spending quality time with your family.
What we call proactive family leadership. It's really important to us to have a healthy relationship with our families. We love them so much. And though the way in which we spend time isn't like a lot of other people, we want to make sure that that's proactive for us, right? So we stacked our values intentionally, and travel was the byproduct. So, all right. Well, with that being said, starting at the why, I'm all for it because, I did have a podcast that used to be the Why Power podcast, but that's a whole nother story. All right. So, invitation to our relationship talks, which will be this month, June 9th. And it will be at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We want you to come there because why? You will be getting all things relationship insurance, growing together, not apart. So in that, like Alan said, we will be having a deeper dive at some of the things that really help you and your partner to grow together. And there's literally nothing worse than growing apart, to what you said, babe. Literally best quote ever, of no greater blessing, no greater joy than the love that comes in a relationship. And when you're growing together, and there's equally no greater pain than growing apart. So this event is specifically designed to keep you on the guardrails and to have that garden of love flourishing. So join us there. The link to register will also be in the show notes. And for a deeper dive in this travel regard. That might be a future event, so stay tuned.
Yeah, I just want to correct myself. So the other event, that will be the next one potentially.
Yeah.
So this upcoming event is for relationship insurance, growing together and not apart. The other event that I was talking about is one that we will probably do in the future.
Definitely.
So keep an eye out for that. Thank you so much for listening. As always, it's not about you or me. It's about
The we.
the we. We'll talk to you next time.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Conscious Couples podcast. We love connecting with the Conscious Couples community, so please make sure you follow us on Instagram. I am at Evolve with Emilia, and Alan is a Lazaros 88.
Also, if you or your partner resonated with this episode, leave us a review at the link in the show notes, and please share this with someone you love and care about.
Until next time, remember, it's not about you or me. It's about
The we.